everyone. Welcome back to the Philosopher Show featuring a common recurring guest, my husband, producer Jack Lloyd.
In the flesh.
Welcome. We have another special guest today, in addition to Jack, which is his name is Tal Oran. And I may have butchered his name again. Yeah, how do you say it again in Hebrew, Tal?
In Hebrew, it's Tal Oran.
Oh, that's so cool. Tal Oran. Right, the R is like a W. Okay.
By the way, epic intro. Your intro is amazing.
Oh, yeah, I love it. I'm like, my
love
ancestors would be proud. That's how I feel. But yeah, thanks so much, Tal, for coming on. We really wanted to have you on because of your wide experience, especially living in Israel, and thought we could have a really good discussion with you, just clearing up some common misconceptions about the culture of Israelis and Jewish people in general. So yeah, anything you want to add to that, Jack?
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Tal is pretty impressive. He's been doing a lot of videos for a long time all around the world, which he's going to tell us about shortly. And I think you're going to find him to be quite a curious anomaly out there, because in a lot of ways, he breaks all the stereotypes that we constantly hear on Twitter, because every time you sign in, all I hear is just, this is a bunch of colonial occupiers and their brightest day. And so he's kind of run with this kind of joke as a trope, and has really showed people that what they may think, based on the different media outlets and propaganda outlets that just keep on making huge misleading, statements about the situation there, that, he's kind of going to break some of those ideas and break some of those stereotypes here. So if you would, Tal, give us a little background about yourself and let everyone know what's important to you and why.
So hi, everyone. My name is Tal. I'm a world traveler now. Since the October 7th war, have become a sort of pseudo advocate for my country, Israel. And I say pseudo advocate because I don't come from the world of politics or the world of war policy, warfare, all this stuff that has become so popular in the last year. Everybody's become an expert in warfare and genocide and geopolitics and whatever it be. I'm a college dropout and a Mizrahi Jew, most importantly, which is my identity. And I was raised partly in America, partly in Israel by Jewish Mizrahi parents. I come from a very Middle Eastern family, and I try to essentially dispel the myths and the lies, like Jack had said, about Israel that are propagated in the media all the time, about how Israel is this white colonial nation made by a European supremacist ideology that came from Europe, from Eastern Europe. And I try to stick that to specifically the pro-Palestinians / the Arab supremacists of the world, who have now teamed up with sort of the liberal left ideology. And even now we're seeing this sort of woke right ideology that are all coming together for the shared hatred of Jewish people. Not just anti-Semitism, but just pure Jewish hatred. So that's kind of my shtick. That's kind of what I do.
So in terms of your background, I mean, you've been doing a unique type of travel vlogging for a long time. I think that's, to me, what makes you stick out from others, is that not only do you have an American experience, an Israeli experience, but you have a global experience of looking at different peoples and cultures and seeing what life is like. Could you give us some backdrop on all the different countries and things you've seen traveling the world? Because it's one thing to colorize something and say, oh, you're all a bunch of genocide, colonialist, apartheid people. It's another to be around the world and see what those things really look like in countries that have some of those things. So could you contextualize that for us a bit?
Yeah, so in my journey traveling around the world, I became one of the, I don't want to say the biggest, but one of the bigger travel vloggers in the YouTube travel industry for a while. I started my travel vlog in 2014, right as I graduated high school. I was 17 years old. And first place I went to was Sub-Saharan Africa, and it changed my life. And that led me on a journey of 10 years in 70 countries around the world that I've been to now. Wow. Mostly in Asia and Europe. And I even lived in Asia and a bunch of different countries for a while. So I really got this perspective on life. It made me really appreciate my American identity as well, because every time I came back to America, I appreciated all the things that I have in sort of the first world of the developed world. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the reasons why I have sort of a big ego online, or why I feel so confident with saying the points or talking in the way that I do, is because I've actually done the work to go to these places that have actual genocides in them, or have had actual genocides in them, or where living conditions are actually impoverished, where people are actually starving. And I've seen them with my own eyes, and I've walked through those people's lives hand in hand, and done documentaries about them on my YouTube channel, filmed it. It's all public. So if anybody ever wants to scrutinize or check my reputation, it's all on the internet. And that's what gives me all this confidence to be able to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with so much straightforwardness. Like, I'm not afraid to beat around, or I don't want to beat around the bush. I want to call things out the way that they are. I want to call the sort of BS that I see as it is. And I really do feel like this traveling around the world gave me such a good grounding on different people groups. I mean, I've lived in the Philippines, I've lived in Sri Lanka, I've taken cargo ships across the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. I've really been with people from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. And it gives me just so much confidence to be able to talk about this matter.
So, for example, online, lots of people make this generalization about what life is like in Israel. And they say it's this apartheid ethno state. And it gives people these visions, like they are imagining these white Jews walking down the street, and on the other side of the street is segregation, and the brown people have to stay on one side, and they have to use separate washrooms, and everything is discrimination everywhere, and you can't, buy property or do anything. What would you say to people who try to characterize Israel in this way?
Wow, I would use some colorful language. I would say, "What are you, stupid? What's wrong with you?" No, I mean, it's all BS. There's no such thing as apartheid in Israel. Like unequivocally, you can denounce it. I would actually say the only place that apartheid actually exists in the region is in the Arab world against every other ethnic minority. I mean, in every single Palestinian city in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, every single one, there is not one Jewish person living in it. Not because the Jewish people don't want to live there. They do not allow Jewish people to live amongst them. But in every single Jewish city in Israel, there are Arabs mostly either living or working in there. And then in Judea and Samaria and the contested areas in the West Bank, there's multiple scenarios or multiple examples of Arabs that have actually gone to live with the Jewish people in Judea and Samaria, where the so-called apartheid is happening. I'll give you an example. There's a city called Ariel, which is Ariel in English, the biggest city in the one of the biggest cities in the West Bank in Judea and Samaria. It has a university with a freaking particle accelerator. It's like a very, very developed city. In that city, that university, inside Ariel University, has like 10,000 Palestinian students who come from the West Bank to study in a school in the occupied West Bank. Tell me, somebody explain to me how that apartheid works. Before the war, there was an Arab man who used to see, he had his own hummus restaurant inside of the city. Again, I visited it myself on my YouTube videos. So when I actually think of apartheid, the only place where I see apartheid is everywhere else, where every single ethnic minority, no matter if they're Jewish or Christian or Mandean or Coptic or Assyrian or Kurdish, whatever they be, living amongst the Arab ethno-nationalists, the Islamists, they're oppressed. But in the Jewish world, if you want to go to Israel, first of all, 70% of the country looks like me, is either black or brown, are Jews who come from Mizrahi descent who look like me. But besides that, we have people of East Asian descent, we have people of South African descent, or Sub-Saharan African descent, West African descent, living amongst us as equals. Some are citizens, some are not, depending on what purpose they're there for, if they're Jewish or if they're not. And then we have obviously 2 million Arabs that lives amongst us with equal rights. We have Arabs of Bedouin descent, of Druze descent, and then ones who consider themselves Palestinians, or some people call them 1948 Arabs, depends on what you identify as. Samaritans. I mean, we have so much diversity in Israel. We are the most diverse country in the entire Middle East, more so than even the United Arab Emirates. And I wear that with a badge of honor and pride as an Israeli.
One of the things that we hear a lot too in the U.S., and this is like a good comparative counterpoint, is, in the U.S. we have, BLM as kind of this prototypical leftist movement. And of course, there was conflicts that came later on when BLM started to support the Free Palestine movement. But in our sphere, one of the counters that people will say and mock them about when they say, oh, it's all racism and there's systemic racism that's so rampant and so strong, people will point out that there are Black people who are in positions of political power, like in Congress or mayors, or have significant businesses, or even Obama, even though he's half and half, whatever. You kind of have this difference, of opinion when you look at the situation. You say, okay, well, if the people that you're saying are being discriminated against have significant positions of power, that doesn't really lend credence to the idea that there is this, at least an outright super crazy force of discrimination going on.
Right.
Could the same be said of Israel, or is it like, oh, you can't have any Arab person be in any position of power or business or influence?
Right, own a business, have property.
Actually, every Israeli will tell you that we discriminate. We're a bunch of racist people. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not even gonna beat around the bush about it. We're Middle Eastern. We are the most racist people on planet Earth. And this is coming from somebody who's traveled to 70 countries. I usually consider people in East Asia as generally very racist, but it's
I was gonna say China's pretty strong.
It's a different kind of racism as the racism in the Middle East. Generally, racism in the Middle East leads to violence, and then they end up murdering each other. So based on different classes or tribes, whatever you are, the one thing that I can say with pride as an Israeli, we are extremely racist. The Ashkenazi Jews can be racist against the Mizrahis, and the Mizrahis against the Ethiopians, and the Ethiopians against the Arabs, and vice versa. And the circle goes around. The one thing I can say with pride as an Israeli, we don't kill each other over it. Yes, we have racial problems like in every single diverse nation. In the United States of America, you guys both live in the U.S. You can attest to how much racism there is in the U.S. And so people in Canada would say the same thing, and people in the U.K. would say the same thing. This is what happens when you have a hodgepodge of people of different backgrounds living together. But the one thing that binds us all together as Jewish people, at least, who live in the country, and then whoever is, whether they're Jewish or not, who identify as a Zionist or believe in the creation of the state of Israel, is, for example, on October 7th, when Hamas broke into Israel, they didn't ask the Tanzanians, the Filipinos, the Nepali, the Jewish, the Christian, and the Muslims who they were before they murdered them. They just murdered them. They murdered them on the basis of the fact that they were in Israel. And this is what binds us all together in Israel. It doesn't matter when Hezbollah fires rockets from Lebanon into Israeli territory. Before the rocket falls, it doesn't discriminate whether it's a Palestinian it's about to kill or a Jew it's about to kill. It just kills. Same for Hamas, same for the Houthis. So in Israel, yes, we have problems. We have a bunch of racial problems. Always and forever we will always be. There's a common saying about you ask one Jew or two Jews, you get 15 opinions. Like that is the common thing with Jewish people. We disagree about everything. We argue about everything. We can't ever come to the same page, but we don't kill each other over it. And that's something I'm very, very proud of. We take pride in trying to be better people. But when you look around us, all of our neighbors, whether it's in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, oppression and straight up homicides based on race, based on religion, based on sexuality. It is like that is the status quo. So for us, when those things happen in Israel, it's a shock. It's very rare, based on color or race or religion. It's a rare thing to happen. With our neighbors, it's the status quo, and that's something I can say unequivocally. We have issues, but I'm proud of the fact of how we carry ourselves.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, we can speak as Americans, and I can also speak to just coming from an Asian background, that there is a lot of superiority and tribalism, yeah, basically wherever you go. But the difference is, do you value property rights or not? Can you actually trade voluntarily or disassociate and just leave each other alone? And that's definitely the case in Asia. When it comes to culturally, you may have Japanese people thinking they're more superior, or Chinese people thinking that, but they will trade. And at the end of the day, that happens in America as well. There's definitely a lot of jokes about stereotypes in America, but it's usually most people get along, and in a lot of cases, those differences are made fun of, but at the same time, kind of like celebrated. There's an air of camaraderie here, especially in the States, depending where you go, where it's like a pleasure to have like a melting pot, because with the melting pot of cultures, you have so many different kinds of cuisines, goods and services. Like, why are there so many Vietnamese people like doing nails? Like maybe there's a specialization there, but someone else some other people don't want to do it. Or like a lot of Chinese restaurants. Very rare to see like a Jewish restaurant, like like a bagel place. There's Jewish bagel places. But yeah, it's really with that sort of respect of property rights, you can come to at least respect each other and value each other, even if you may think that your own race, like Chinese, I'm Chinese and Vietnamese, you may want to see it continue and have a level of, tribalism or desire for that to grow and expand. You might understand that being Jewish as well. But at the same time, you respect other people, other cultures, and you're not trying to enslave them. And I'm glad you mentioned the Middle East, because I think a lot of people in America don't understand that a lot of countries in the Middle East, like slavery is common, murder, rape. It's just the norm. Like you said, it's like you can go in many developed countries and you ask them, is slavery wrong? Is murder wrong? Is rape wrong? And you'll immediately get, of course, it's terrible. But in some places, they're still like, nah, if you're gay, we'll stone you to death or we'll force you to transition, for example. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a big thing that people just don't see. And especially if you are in the public school system in America and go through like higher level, publicly funded education in college, you're going to get even more propaganda that that's the case. It'd be like, oh, it's just, innocent people everywhere. It's like we all have the same values worldwide. And it's like, nah, there are places in the world where they haven't caught up to basic property rights and respect. So.
Yep, absolutely. Even in Gaza, on that specific point about slavery, I'll give you two pretty damning examples from recent times. In Gaza, I don't know if you guys remember this. It was recent. IDF brigade rescued a Yazidi sex slave who was in Gaza for 10 years. ISIS, at the time where ISIS was running rampant around Iraq and Syria, they had sold a Yazidi girl to the highest bidder in Gaza. I guess it was some sort of Hamas businessman. And they sold her through Egypt, and then she was smuggled through the border, and she was living for 10 years. And the IDF rescued her and sent her back home. They got her back to Syria. And that's just one example of recent slavery that's taken place just in Gaza. And that's, again, our direct neighbors. But even in Gaza, there's a neighborhood known as Al-Abid. Abid in Arabic means slave. And that neighborhood is specifically reserved for all the Afro-Gazans, which are a sect of Gazans. They have a few of them around Israel. There's Afro-Gazans, the Afro-Bedouins. These are sub-Saharan African or West African people who migrated to the Levant at some point in history. Some say it was 500 years ago. Some say it was 1,000 years ago. And the Muslims, they'll always say that they were accepted by the Arabs, yet they're labeled, even today in 2025, as Abid, which literally means in Arabic slave, or Abid.
Wow.
And the neighborhood is known as Al-Abid, the neighborhood of the slaves in Gaza, even today in 2025. Even during the war, nothing has changed.
It's interesting to see too the nature of how people characterize the situation in Gaza. And one of the things that I find frustrating in this arena is trying to communicate to people the dynamic nature of that whole region, because people will throw around terms like open air prison or concentration camp, and they'll have no sense of the history or sense of what it really means when you have two governments and they both have tight borders around a small area, because it's not just Israel, it's also Egypt. Could you speak a bit to the situation in Gaza as far as Hamas and the tunnels and kind of what's going on in that region, especially since you've had some eyes on it?
Yeah, I mean, instead of spending their money constructing infrastructure for people to live, bomb shelters in case they were to attack Israel and need bomb shelters, the way that Israel has installed bomb shelters in every conceivable place, the Gazan government, which is Hamas, and I will also say the Palestinian people are very much complicit in this. I don't give them a free pass, unlike some people who say, no, there's a difference between Hamas and the Palestinian people. While there's a difference on paper, the reason why there haven't been elections, for example, in Judea and Samaria for the last 19 years is because Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the PA, knows for a fact that if he were to try to step down or run elections, Hamas would be the first people that would go into power. Hamas is favorable in the Gaza Strip and favorable in the West Bank. It's actually favorable by most Palestinians. Palestinians love Hamas. And so there's a massive issue there with I believe the tunnel system has now surpassed 4 times the size of the New York subway system, the New York metro system under Gaza. It may be twice or 4 times the size of the New York subway system. That doesn't happen without complacency by the Gazan people as well. You know, I put a lot of the onus on the Gazan people as well, in that manner, because you don't, this is a tiny piece of land. You don't get to construct something like this without also being complicit by the people of Gaza also giving you an in or allowing you to construct this stuff. And the problem is the ideology, and a big part of the blame goes on the UN and human rights organizations that were supposed to de-radicalize these populations have been found complicit with radicalizing these populations. And that's how you end up with this insane situation where you have a massive tunnel network, some of which we haven't even found yet, leading through Egypt's border, even through the north of the Gaza Strip and Jabalia area, and all throughout the Strip, that is capable of bringing in heavy ammunitions, IEDs, constructing drug and meth laboratories underground, oil refineries, like insane stuff underground that they're able to create small arms in. They're able to construct drones, water pipe, small mortars. I mean, it is insane what they've been able to construct under Gaza. And people always misconstrue my criticism of the Gazan people, the Palestinian people, with hatred. I say I have so much love for the Palestinian people, for the Arab people in the Middle East. Look at what's possible when they put their minds together. Imagine if they were to not put their minds towards building infrastructure to try to kill Jewish people. Building a New York subway system with crude materials under Gaza in less than 20 years is insane. That is a feat. That is a human engineering feat. And now imagine if they did that, if they were to build a Singapore, which is always what Gaza was compared to with the amount of money that was poured into there. Imagine if they built residency, if they built parks, if they built mosques, Islamic learning centers. Imagine if they invested in their own population. But no, we have a reality where we have this massive tunnel network, all of which is going to have to be destroyed. And it's just been a big waste of money, time, and lives of people. It's very, very sad.
It is very sad. And one of the things that, I find frustrating, because I'm often dealing with these issues in deconstructing other people's sources, because I myself have not physically been there. I have family who have been there and family who's been there multiple times in my immediate family. And I've been, and knee deep in this issue from afar for a long time, seeing pictures, videos, and stuff like that. But for me, what I like to do is I like to take a look at other people's sources and break down what it is that they're relying on to make statements. And so when we're dealing with these things about like who's responsible for causing this and whatnot, it's very rare that on the other side, anyone wishes to ascribe any causality to anyone who's Palestinian Arab. In every instance, they try to say that, no matter what happens, it's Israelis and Jews who are responsible for every possible thing, no matter what. There's no agency, there's no autonomy.
Right, they're just victims perpetually. And
the I would say one of the most interesting parts to it, especially with Hamas, is that a lot of people say, Hamas, they were propped up by Israel. And I'll go down and say, okay, what's your sources? Because clearly you weren't there sitting on, the borderline with whatever it was going on. And at every turn, every single Israeli whistleblower always says they just let money in from Qatar, Iran. They just let people go in and build up mosques, build up training centers and all this other stuff. So it's this weird situation where on one hand, if you allow it in, now, you're supporting terrorism. But if you stop it, well, now you're stopping aid and you hate education in schools. So it's a circular reasoning to the whole situation. There's no such thing as individual agency for the other people. And it's especially rich for people in our camp. Some of them will say, if you vote for someone, like if you voted for Trump, you're responsible for that, kind of signaling. You're responsible for that endorsement. But then if people vote for Hamas, those people are not responsible for that endorsement. So in our own camp, there's this philosophical contradiction that they engage in, where they want to assign causality and say, if you vote for Trump, you're responsible for what happens. But if the people over there vote for Hamas, well, they're not responsible. They're perpetual victims. And so this is the type of very nuanced philosophical difficulty that we try to wrestle with and get people to think a little bit bigger picture out of.
It's two specific things too. It's this constant infantilization of Palestinians and Arabs because of racism, and it comes from racism in the West. It is known. I believe the term colloquially is known as the racism of low expectations. I know it was popularized by somebody else, but I know Elika Laban, who's an incredible activist of Iranian descent, who sort of popularized it as of recent. I know somebody told me it's attributed to somebody else in the past, but this idea of a racism of low expectations, you expect so little of the brown and black people of the Middle East that you're willing to just infantilize all of them. And it's like, of course they can't be responsible for voting for Hamas. They don't know any better. They're a bunch of cavemen. They're ooga booga. It doesn't matter. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just a bunch of Muslim Arabs. But this is my core issue. This is what I stand upon. This is why I wear this hat and why I do what I do in the way that I speak, why I talk about the kafia, why I dispel myths about the Arab world. This region has been colonized. The Arabs colonized all of us. They destroyed all of our lives and all of our culture. It doesn't mean that people need to be embarrassed of being Arabs or Muslims or need to throw away that ideology, but we need to wake the world up to, and we need to wake up the Middle East to what has actually happened. If I don't know too much about the Libertarian Party. I don't know too much about American conservatism or American leftism. It's just a little that I know surface level because I don't attribute myself to any specific camp. But if people think they can run away from what's going on and what's festering in the Middle East for the last 1,000 years, if they think that this ideology is not coming for every single person in the West, you have another thing coming. If you try to infantilize these people and make them seem like these little brown bugs in the Middle East that we don't care about and we shouldn't attribute anything to, they're all the same. They're just a bunch of Arabs. No. There's a bunch of people who are suffering currently today oppression by these people, and we have a moral duty to stop it, or at least point a spotlight on it and make sure people understand what's actually happening. And if you think that that's not coming to the West, if it's not coming to America, it's already in Europe. We all know this. I mean, the signs have been clear for a long time. But if you think that it's not coming to America and it's not going to creep up on the values that you hold dear in America, whether you're right, left, or center, you have got another thing coming. The ideology behind jihadism, Arabism, Arab colonization, and Islamism, that comes for everybody. Comes for everybody.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of this funny thing that, in our world, right, that people critique us for. They say, oh, you just support the Israeli government and you're IDF, you're Mossad, or this is Hezbollah. They say these things without having any consideration that you can recognize the danger in the world and yet think more government is not the solution, or at least the way that things are being done is not the solution. But it doesn't make that not a problem. And that's where, we're at with these things, is that these people have been so deluded into thinking that only Jews have agency, only Israel is the only possible thing, in terms of conquest or conflict, that they have no concept that other people have agency, but other people have ideologies and actions and governments that also do violence. And without that total picture, people then end up, without realizing it, just supporting a new type of violence or state violence. Just like you might say, well, maybe it's two-state solution, right? And then I just sit there and say, you call yourself, an ancap libertarian, and you complain about us and us just talking about geopolitics, but you're saying, oh, give them a two-state solution. So you want another government, and then the same people who voted for Hamas to then have a stronger tax base for which to get resources and keep doing that ideology with a new pseudo-democracy, right? So it's this really weird situation where people aren't even hearing themselves. They don't even have a conceptualization of their own hypocrisies because they don't have any solutions about these things. They don't have a sense of, oh, okay, and then what? Because, we deal a lot with economics and thinking about, okay, and then what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Okay, well, what's the next thing if you have a big group of people who have genocidal intentions and they say they're going to keep doing it and they've acted on that? That doesn't just magically go away just because you say, oh, IDF should just roll over. It's like, okay, does that mean no more dead kids ever? Does that mean everybody's just hunky-dory after? And that's where I think that you come in and you kind of bring that, because I think your own personal family story really highlights that. And it's a big story that's lost in this. So could you, give us a little background about your, grandparents and your family and what happened to you to contextualize that?
Sure. I also just want to point out real quick some of the comments that I'm seeing here on the right. Like we have somebody like Matthew who's saying he's unsubbing because I don't know. You guys are somehow supporting the Israeli government. You guys are supposed to be anarchists.
Yeah.
But
Right.
they're meant,
To take the other side.
They can't
means
handle
we
it.
love.
but apparently Israelis were dancing on 9/11. I mean, the only video proof that you really have of people dancing in the Middle East on 9/11 is literally in Palestine. On the streets of Gaza and the West Bank, they were handing out candies after 9/11. But this is what it always ends up being. It's always like this. It's like you bring up concrete evidence, and then it just goes down these anti-Semitic conspiracies holes of just like, the Jews did this and the Jews did this, and this is why the Jews are responsible for this. But here, and this ties in perfectly to what you asked me. My family story literally completely 180 negates every single point, every single pro-Palestinian talking point. And this is the story of over 70% of the Jewish population of Israel who come from Mizrahi Jewish heritage or Ethiopian Jewish heritage. So my family, I'm a mixed breed of Mizrahi Jew from all over the Middle East. Some of my grandparents are from Eastern Iraq, some are from Baghdad, some are from Turkey, some are from the Caucasus Mountain region. All were ethnically cleansed, kicked out, or made their lives violent or unsafe by Muslim and Arab supremacists in the countries they came from. Specifically in Iraq, half of my family, which I'm very, very close to, it's the side of my family that I'm probably the closest to, was born in Baghdad in Iraq. And in 1941, June 1st and 2nd, this is before the creation of the State of Israel, Iraqi national supremacists who got inspiration from Hitler, specifically from the Palestinian Grand Mufti. His name was Muhammad Haj Amin al-Husseini, who traveled to Germany in the 30s to convalesce with Hitler and convince him of this idea that he would have to ethnically cleanse and murder all the Jews in Europe, and then the next place he would have to continue that mission on is in the Middle East, because there were plenty of Jews there. There were about 1 million Mizrahi Jews across North Africa and the Middle East. And so Mein Kampf gets translated into Arabic, becomes a best-selling book in the Muslim world. And in addition to that, Hitler youth groups start popping up on the streets of Baghdad, and you end up with a massacre known as the Farhud, June 1st and 2nd, 1941. 180 Iraqi Jews murdered in the streets. My grandparents had Arab supremacists coming to the doors with swords in the middle of the night to come murder them when they were 15, 16 years old. Over 1,800 others had their houses looted, stolen from, burnt down. Just the worst kind of atrocities, I'll let you use your imagination, were done to them on that day. And this began the exodus of Jews from Baghdad, the final exodus of Jews from Iraq. This was a community of Jewish people that had existed there, and I tested this with a DNA test I did on myself and on my mom. Genetically, the Jewish people, the Jewish population of Baghdad had been there for over 2,200 to 2,500 years, from when the Babylonians, King Nebuchadnezzar, sacked Jerusalem in the story of the Bible. Apparently it's true. Go believe it. But when he sacked Jerusalem, he casted Jews from Jerusalem out to Babylon. He brought them there as slaves initially, and then they built themselves up within the society. And that's the story of my family. That's the group that my grandpa specifically was from. And they believed that they were in Babylon for 2,000 years, predates the existence of Islam, predates the idea of what an Arab is, the Arab language, Arab culture. But then Arabs came and colonized it and then just ruined the whole thing. And they did this in Algeria. They did this in Morocco. They did this in Tunisia. They did it in Turkey. They continuously do it in Turkey even today. They did it in Armenia and Azerbaijan. They did it in Georgia. They did it everywhere they possibly could. The Muslim Arab supremacists ruined the lives of the Jewish people and the ethnic minorities under them. And they continue to do it till this very day.
And what's really kind of concerning to me about that situation, there's, about 850,000 Jews who had to flee these other countries, and many of them sought refuge in Israel, is that in our side of things, in terms of the social sphere, people will say, well, that's the fault of the Zionists. You know what I mean? They couldn't help it in these other countries. They're like, these are all Zionist collaborators. And so it's really funny how these people who claim to be so caring and empathetic and want to be humanizing, dehumanize Jews, being forcibly kicked out, being told they can only take a wristwatch, 3 shirts, and 50 dinar. And that's it. And they're like, oh, well, it sucks. They were probably for Israel. And it's like, it's just the weirdest thing. Like, somehow a country being established justifies other countries persecuting Jews who are just chilling in that country. Like as if you had Irish independence and then the British government said, oh, the Irish up north, they want independence. We're going to go ahead and start persecuting any Irish person in in Britain. We're going to start going through London and ransacking, Irish people's homes because the Northern Irish want independence. That's the level of philosophy these people are bringing, and it's just sickening to me that this is the kind of collectivism these people work in, because they claim that they're like, oh, we care about dead kids. Like, yeah, me too, exactly. That's a bad thing. They claim they care about people having property rights. Like, exactly. But then their default is, well, if this one government is gone or these one people are gone, then there's world peace, and then that's the end of the equation. It's just all kumbaya after that. And that's what's crazy to me. It just ignores 1,400 years of history as if no other people ever had any conquest, ever had any religious battles, any had forced conversions. It's the most ahistorical thing you can possibly imagine, and I think that a part of it is just that people want to find just one boogeyman because it's easier for most people just to think very narrowly, myopically, and they can't factor in there's many different interests and there's many different good and bad actors. Just like in America, not every single person supports the person who's president. Not everybody who's in Israel supports Netanyahu.
Right.
But it doesn't matter which way you go. People want to collectivize and breed hate. And it's just that over here, the hatred and collectivization has gotten to a point of ridiculousness in just one direction.
Yeah, I think that the desire for a scapegoat is so common. Like when things are so terrible and you can't like actually understand what's really going on, you try to find a scapegoat. And throughout history, Jews have been that common group of people that have been targeted as a scapegoat. Like, oh, it's the money changers, it's the Jews, they just always keep to themselves, whatever. Like that throughout history has come up. And this sort of racism happens. I think you said earlier, like racism of low expectations. It's also like this racism where you don't allow certain races to have ownership and agency. If they commit murder, if they themselves are racist, oh, it's just a byproduct of colonialism.
Right.
Something like that. But yet, how does that, if that's true, why does that ever not apply to Jews, for example, who also were colonialized and kicked out of many countries and violated? Why can't you argue right now it's just blowback for the past and how they were treated? Of course, they don't argue that. And it's just other people like, they say, if you're not Jewish, well, then it's really, you that's being the like the victim perpetually, always. And that's kind of the case here in the United States. You were mentioning earlier, like you will see this sort of collectivism and tribalism, need for a scapegoat creeping into other countries. Well, it is already here in the US too, where you have this concept of racism being redefined as a product of white supremacy, not just simply what it is, which is you find a certain race superior or inferior. That's the basic definition. Here it's being redefined to be like, nope, only white people can be racist and there's no such thing. And if you are racist, it's white people's fault. And it's just so backwards because now you're removing agency from people who aren't white, or apparently Jews are now white, and just like Irish people were white, but they're white now.
Somehow this skin color turned white in 2023. I'm not sure, but I always say
yellow people being white.
I always say this exactly what you're talking about is like Arabs started the African slave trade. Arabs were the ones who started it, and they never ended it. The Arab slave trade is happening today. Right. I don't want to point exactly which countries because I want to visit some of them and I'm not allowed to say, but like many of these countries in the Middle East still actively enslave both Southeast Asians, South Asians, and Sub-Saharan Africans and West Africans till this very day, like full on slavery and human trafficking. It is like a common thing in the Arab world that never ended. So if Arabs are somehow not capable of supremacy and racism because they're brown or because they're not white supremacists, what is it that they're doing? It's just like okay, racism. Like if they're oppressing everybody based on race and religion all the time today in the Middle East, what is that? Is that not racism? Like to me, that it's insane. This duality that people can hold, that like white supremacy or white people are the cause of all evil on this planet. But the racism and slavery that has existed in the Arab world, which predates white identity, quote unquote, like Western white identity. It predates it by like a couple thousand years. There's no, like, we can't put any onus on that. Like, there's no responsibility supposed to be taken by the Arabs at all. They can't do any wrong because they're brown. That's right. It's so racist. It starts becoming racist on the other end.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and it's also especially alarming that people will again, they say these big generalizations, and we have criticisms of Israel. Obviously, from a general perspective, we don't like states generally, but we're especially against forced conscription. We're against gun control. We're against the government trying to pick winners and losers in the market with cronyism. But when people make it seem like as if, oh, okay, there's this Israel and there's this bad boogeyman, they make it seem like as if everywhere else is just like this libertarian utopia, when in reality, all the neighboring countries like engage in whatever they say
is dictatorships,
like 10 times worse in terms of actual real religious discrimination, laws that prevent people from becoming citizens, right? Because a big part is, oh, you don't have a right to return this or that. But these other countries have, paternity laws and maternity laws, depending if it's like Lebanon or Iraq, where it's like you can't become a citizen unless you have that blood. They literally have laws like that. The Saudi government, they literally have a huge group of people there that are residents, but they're not citizens, because only the people who become citizens and rule is a family, a specific bloodline. I mean, that's like beyond racism. That's like, you know what I mean? That's family.
It's supremacy.
And yet that's just like,
yeah, it is supremacy.
It's Arab supremacy.
It just goes over their heads, like as if it's just like, oh, well, that's whatever. And that part is what bothers me. It bothers me that people have no sense of comparative politics and comparative issues to actually take that all in and take it, into consideration. Because I'm like, to me, Israel is like average-ish or above average-ish for a Middle Eastern country in terms of, you could say, total violence. But the people who try to make it seem like as if, oh, Israel is this crazy ethno-state, apartheid, genociding, colonial white invaders that just mass murder everybody. That is the picture that people are given. And that is what we are trying to be like, hey, you really should take a look at the total picture here.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And when we literally look at every other country around us, they are all Arab ethno-states. They are all Islamic supremacist states. Every single one. They're even the most moderate are all in that system. And we have nothing remotely close to that. And I have a personal opinion. I think we do need to tap in a little bit closer to that to preserve our Jewish ethnicity in the country. I think we have to, regardless if we want to or not. And that's a whole tricky, tightrope that you have to walk when you're explaining it. But everywhere around us, for 1,000 kilometers, north, south, east, or west, well, not really west, but kind of west, southwest, every single country is an Arab supremacist ethno-state. Every single one, without bar, without exception. Even the most moderate ones that you may have traveled to because it was a fun tourist destination. If you break down the ethnic minorities that may be living there, they're all suffering immense human rights violations every single day, and nobody's advocating for them. Nobody's fighting for them. There's no refugee status. There's no human rights aids. There's nobody helping them because they're just a bunch of Arabs. They're a bunch of brown Muslim. Like, that's what the ideology is. And I've unfortunately come to learn. I used to be a little bit more optimistic about the world when I used to travel, but I've really come to learn how very dumb many people are about the realities of the Middle East. Like, people do not understand what actually this region looks like and what it is.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important. And this is like that big conversation with Smith and Murray, and that
we'll stand up for them.
That struck, yeah, right. that struck with everybody is this idea of credibility without any experience and actually taking the time to look at these places up close. And there is something to say for that. And it's I think it's been a really dangerous road that people have been going down, where the never been there experts keeps piling up. It's becoming more and more where the people who are the loudest voices are becoming further and further distanced from the sources. It's like there's a person here and they're a podcaster, a comedian, and they're citing a source and they've never been there. And that person is citing a source and they've never been there. And then they're citing the UN. And the UN is citing the UNRWA. And the UNRWA is a Hamas soldier who also works for the, you know what I mean? So it's these things that people don't take the time to be like, how distant am I from the actual primary source? What is reality when it comes to these things? Am I even able to judge these things? And I don't take a firm stand one way or another for myself, because I can't be there to count bodies and to look at them and exhume graves and be like, oh, well, let's look at the back and see if they were shot from behind or the front or what kind of caliber. That's not even possible. It's an active war zone, but people act as if they know it all and are so certain about everything. And they use these very big labels to basically drum up collectivist hatred. And that's bad, whether it's against people in Gaza, where you do demonize every single person, especially because there are tons of innocent people there too, or whether it's against Israel. It's just the collectivist hatred pushes people away from actually having some understanding and from actually trying to build peace. And, that to me is just really what the tragedy of it all, when it comes down to it.
And when you have somebody like Dave Smith, for example, who goes on Joe Rogan, imagine it's just like what you brought up right now. Imagine when he was quoting statistics from UNRWA or from the UN. He actually, instead of saying the UN or UNRWA, he would say, well, actually, it's a Hamas terrorist that I'm quoting their numbers. Imagine how different the podcast would be if every time he quoted these reputable agencies that report on the deaths of Palestinians and their suffering, he said, well, actually, it's a Palestinian human rights advocate who also is an Al Jazeera journalist, who also identifies as a woman and child, who also held a hostage in their house for like 6 months. Like, imagine if there was that context every time. So I take the same opinion as Douglas Murray. Dave Smith, tfaddal, habibi, go. Say whatever you want. I'm all about it. Go talk about Gaza all day, every day. But I reserve the right, with my beautiful brown ass who lives in the Middle East, to criticize you and make fun of you every single day ad nauseum. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what I believe all of our people on our side, we don't need to come and do the Hasbara shtick. And I made a video about this on Twitter. We don't need to do the whole Hasbara shtick where we go, well, here's exactly the calculation of how many people died and you minus it by how many bombs fell. No, it doesn't. Nobody cares. Just make fun of them. I hold the perspective of, if you're going to be a fool and you're going to go on one of the biggest shows in the world and advocate for a side that clearly at the very baseline, we don't even have a number for the people killed because that number is being projected by terrorists. And that is open information that anybody, it's you cannot dispute it. We know that number is being propagated by terrorists. All I'm saying is, let's make fun of them.
And that's exactly what it boils down to for me, because what I did and really my journey in terms of resisting a lot of these different narratives and pushback was just simply saying, okay, well, where'd you get that source? And at every turn, these people who in our camp would be critical of the UN on anything, they'd be like, oh yeah, gun control, no, climate change, no, energy, no, like you name the issue on whatever the UN's reporting, and they're like, no. And I'm like, of course, no. And they're like, oh, on this issue, 100%. We just believe whatever they report.
We're all about it.
Says,
right. CNN.
They say it's unconfirmed in their own reports. And again,
Yeah.
I can't prove or disprove anything, but I'll go to the source and see, okay, what did the UN person say? And I just criticize based on what they say. And they say, oh, well, it's unconfirmed. Okay. That's that's what it boils down to. And there's things that are atrocities that happen. Like the IDF is a diverse group of people. And some of those people are bad. And they will either do something intentionally bad or they'll make a mistake. Because when you have a lot of soldiers in a zone and it's a crazy war zone, that's what people don't get, is it's like, this isn't a freaking video game.
Like last week they murdered, the IDF murdered a bunch of healthcare workers.
Yes.
It was a terrible tragedy. And they at IDF did a report on it. It took them a week. That's too slow. And I can, as an Israeli citizen, I'm embarrassed to say that it's this slow. I'm embarrassed that it feels like a cover-up. The entire nation will openly admit that is bad. We do not agree with that. We don't like it. Whoever shot and killed those Palestinian health workers is going to be prosecuted, hopefully, for it, and hopefully seen justice for it. But that's the difference between our side and theirs. And that has happened multiple times throughout the war where the IDF has made mistakes, like when they killed the World Central Food Kitchen employees. That was early on in the war. Every time one of these things happens, they to my knowledge, to my best of my knowledge, they take accountability. They do a report like any other sovereign nation does. But somehow we live in this world where CNN, Dave Smith, the geniuses of the world, they can just quote 55,000 Gazans, no discrepancy between the fact that there's children on the list, women on the list, Al Jazeera journalists, Hamas terrorists on the list, civilians who committed acts of terrible terror on October 7th. Like, we don't make any discrepancy because of why. Why do we just propagate a number, 55,000, without making any discrepancy whatsoever? And it's important.
Yeah, and that is
no accountability for them.
Exactly.
What about October 7th? Oh, it's just blowback. They're just reacting. They're being oppressed. So therefore, it's okay to murder innocent people.
Yeah.
They don't have that. They
That's
don't
just
have this,
crazy.
totally double standards.
And doesn't it just doesn't it discount the lives of all the innocent people that have actually been killed? Like,
Right.
to me, it's extremely disrespectful to rope in Yahya Sinwar, who is the instigator of October 7th, who caused this whole mess, in with women and children who are innocently killed by an Israeli airstrike. To me, it's like disgusting that we're just openly saying 55,000 people killed and making no discrepancy between a Hamas terrorist who would have done terrible, disgusting things on October 7th and a child and an infant. I don't understand. Do we not have respect for that kid's life, for that woman's life, for that innocent elderly person's life? Don't we want to honor their life when they're killed rather than throw them in a list with a bunch of other terrorists?
Right. And for the people too there that, and this has been a highly debated point, of course, all the people are now experts in guerrilla warfare now. But the funny thing is that they'll say, okay, you know what? They should just do special ops, right? And I sit there and I'm like, okay, first and foremost, the IDF has done special ops. There's coverage of those things and there's video of those things. And I've watched these things and read through it. So when people say, oh, special ops, they make it seem like, oh, well, there's just no casualties. And it's just like a video game. You just click the X button, they extricate
100%
themselves.
pass rate.
Wow, 100% pass rate.
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, like if they don't clear people out of the buildings, right, first, then there is literally crossfire and people who can shoot off rocks, all stuff, and people are dying. And when they did special ops, people died. There was lots of people who were shot because it's literally volleys of machine gun bullets. When they're trying to do a duck down, they drop in a helicopter, or they have agents pretend to be renters and they make it seem like they're going to rent an apartment so they can scope it out. Because you need to have, OPSEC and reconnaissance in order to be able to actually see, is this person there, or are we going to trip off people and then they're going to do something in retaliation? And they make it seem like it's this video game where there's no further learning. Like if you do a special operation, like the enemy doesn't learn from that and look for new clues or signs. You can't do that for hundreds of people kidnapped and not have adaptation, and then suicide bombers and all this other different stuff. So it's like, no matter what way you cut it, they can't handle the fact that in this situation, if you want to rescue people, there's going to be dead people. Like that's like inescapable in this calculation. And either some people have to be cleared out so that when you get them, there's fewer casualties. Or if you're like, we'll just do it like a SWAT team does because of its, some, crazy drug bust thing that we don't agree with, but, like a SWAT team does, you do that. It's not like, these soldiers can just waltz on in with, red and blue sirens on, like, woo, the police is here. Like, the people will tip them off. They'll see them and they'll either kill hostages or set up booby traps or drop down a tunnel or this or that. It's not like a video game thing where you can just like, radio in. It's like, all right, here we got the laser precision strike. You know what I mean? There is crossfire and there's people who are going to die. And it's just the people
and there's
who are
unknowns.
And there's
You're
unknowns.
trying to rescue innocent people and they're deliberately being hidden. And you're going into enemy territory where you don't know the full landscape. You don't know, is there a tunnel under here where there's like bombs gonna, explode over here, like missiles being launched? Like, you don't know, and you have to be very careful. And I think that's the key that a lot of these people are missing too. They're like, oh, special ops, right, to save literal hostages that were taken on October 7th. Where's the outrage for the taking of those hostages? These same people like, oh, free Palestine, like, oh, like Hamas, it's just blowback. They're in an open air prison. It's like, do you not think they have agency? Do you know responsibility that you shouldn't morally condemn them for kidnapping and in many cases just outright murdering them or raping them? There is no conception of that sort of responsibility onto them. And yet over here, you're like, oh man, you got to be really careful when you rescue hostages. Like, it's another example of just double standards. It's very frustrating. And these people are absolutely morally insane.
Mm-hmm.
They're not consistent. And we do live in that kind of world where a lot of people are very collectivist and tribalistic and morally insane. Yeah.
So in terms of, everything that you've seen as a whole now here, how would you say, in your opinion, things are looking going forward in terms of the culture and actions and things like that of what you're seeing? Because again, people could say, well, maybe it wasn't so, bad then, it wasn't apartheid, but it's apartheid now, in response. Have things materially changed, or is it, still back to like, same old life overall?
Well, I mean, now everything is a lot more difficult for Palestinians. So October 7th was a big L for them, for a lack of better terms. For all the winning that the jihadists and the Arab supremacists will undoubtedly claim when this war is eventually over, everybody in the Middle East is worse off, maybe besides Israel, after October 7th. The Islamic regime of Iran is the poorest it's ever been and unable to fund any of its proxies, pretty much. The Houthis are being bombed relentlessly by the United States of America. They'll survive it, no doubt in my mind, because there are essentially overglorified cave people who are running around with AK-47s and sandals. They're able to run from cave to cave and keep on their ballistic missile pursuits. But they're going to be hit, and a bunch of people are going to die, and it's going to be unfortunate. They're not going to gain anything from it. Their biggest oil field was just destroyed the other day. Lebanon is pretty much incapacitated to IDF strikes. Hezbollah is trying to rearm desperately, but being hit every single scenario possible. We've conquered land from Syria that we're probably not going to give back. Syria is now looking at potentially joining the Abraham Accords. It may be too early to tell, but al-Jolani is considering maybe taking a step back from his persecution of minorities in this country to make peace for Israel, and maybe help us usher in a new age of peace in Lebanon and Syria and Israel together. Egypt just lost its border access to Gaza, and the Palestinian people in Gaza are just going to suffer pretty much eternally now. There seems to be no real solution in sight. And same goes for the Palestinians in the West Bank. Trust is all-time low. So, I mean, like, Israel will come out of this relatively unscathed. We've got trauma in our hearts. It's built a lot of character in a lot of us. It's hurt us deeply. I would say it hurts every Jewish person and every pro-Israel person in the world equally as it did the citizens of Israel. But we're going to be fine. The Arab world is now hurting. And from their perspective, in my opinion, it has to be, they have to kind of choose where they go next. Like, they're all in a way worse position than they were on October 6th. And October 6th, if they ever were able to get back the gumption they had in 67 and 48, they could have potentially done us in for. But not only did they mess up, I mean, they royally messed up. They came so far from their goals of ethnically cleansing the Jews from Israel that they all were left incapacitated pretty much. And that's every single Arab country in the Levant. And then some, even the ones further away, have all been affected by this in some sort of manner. So, when I look at the prospects of where we are in the future, I think actually it's extremely positive for Israel, as ironic as that sounds. Israel just received almost 2 years of free press, and as much negative press that came with it. You have to imagine there are many people, from just like every statistic in the world, there's going to be this small minority, which is still going to be quite a few million of people who are interested in now traveling to Israel, supporting Israel, maybe moving to Israel. I mean, I know Aliyah numbers of Jews moving back to Israel is at an all-time high during the war, and conscription into the IDF is at an all-time high during the war. So for us, it's looking relatively positive because this is what we do. Now, I flip it on to the Arabs is like, what will you do now? How will you better your society? Because the status quo is no longer the status quo. You guys are in a tough pickle right now. You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and not go back to the supremacist ways, to the racist ways, to the oppressive ways of your past. The question is, will they be able to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough situation because, as you were discussing before, at the root, when you have an evangelical religion and there's a subset of that is especially violent for that religion, it's something that requires a much bigger cultural change, and people being willing to, move away from those ideas. It's just unfortunate that in the process, of course, when there's all these different fights constantly over people trying to see who can be the next ruler, it creates more radical animosity, no matter which way you cut it. When people lose people on either side, it causes people to want to, fight back and to, basically get revenge in some cases. And so it really is going to require something, more of the likes of Europe, where many European countries, if you go back hundreds of years ago, it's normal now to think of European countries as, oh, they're all friendly. You could just like hop on a train and go see whoever. You go back hundreds of years ago, and those countries were in constant warfare with each other.
Sure.
30 years war, Catholicism versus Protestantism, and different types of rulers, and having separations of kings and stuff. People don't get that, like, the Middle East, what is kind of now, used to be Europe, in terms of like constant conflicts and developments. And now Europe take it for granted. It's like, yeah, it's pretty peaceful here. You know what I mean? Even though you're German and French, but you don't think German and French are at each other's throats. So, it's not like it's impossible for people who were once historical enemies to eventually find peace. It's just a matter, at least from our opinions, that they need to learn more about voluntaryism, which is, this idea that people should respect each other's bodies and properties as long as they're not initiating physical force, as long as they're not, defrauding another. They should be free to live as they see fit. And we just think that the more that people respect that basic idea of consent and being like, okay, I'm not going to steal from you, I'm not going to murder you, I'm going to respect and honor my agreements, I'm going to respect your property, you respect mine. If that can be the culture, then that's what we see as being a real path to peace.
Yeah, definitely. A culture of property rights is what will actually enable it, a cultural shift and an incentive to change. Because if there is no respect of property rights, then it means that the people who are the most violent and whatever, they're the ones that will rise to power. Versus when you have a society that is based on property rights, it is the ones who provide the most value to their fellow man, who associate with them, have property rights of their own on a voluntary basis. Those are the people that rise to the top. So the incentive system of a property rights-based society is what encourages more of this improved ethics and a valuing of ethics. Whereas the reverse, of course, the only incentive is for the most violent, most psychopathic, lying, fraudulent people to rise to power. And that's what you see in places where there is really no property rights. I mean, China is a really good example of that. And they recently, well, not recently, I guess it doesn't feel, it kind of feels recent, like ever since 2020, you had the massive worldwide lockdowns, different governments just responding to, a virus that was funded by, an agency here in the States. I'll try not
Eco
to.
Health Alliance, yeah.
Right, yeah. And released in Wuhan, and they used that right before, in 2019, there were all these protests in Hong Kong saying, hey, the CCP is trying to take over Hong Kong, and they're trying to instill, get rid of Cantonese, trying to take over the police and everything, and they have. And then they implemented a national security law under that guise of, fighting COVID. And they've just taken over, and now it's just silent. When it comes to the major news agencies, there's definitely still people advocating for what's happening in Hong Kong, but that sort of huge worldwide focus and press you had from major corporate press, in 2019, it just went away because it was all taken up by that excuse from the CCP to be like, oh, there's an emergency now. Oh my God, we got
by COVID and then Russia, Ukraine, and then it becomes old news.
Right.
I got to visit Hong Kong slightly before October 7th war, and I got to see what Hong Kong looks like under sort of a pseudo CCP control now, and it's terrible. I mean, I didn't enjoy my time in Hong Kong at all. And when I asked friends of mine what it was like before, they told me this is not the same Hong Kong that we got to experience. And I actually it's not common that I go to a country and I don't like it, but Hong Kong is a place I genuinely disliked. I really didn't enjoy my time there. And I'll say furthermore, that's my fear with Israel-Palestine. My fear with the Arab-Israeli conflict is if there isn't that pressure forever for these Arab people in the Middle East to change, they have an opportunity now to change, to come out of where they are right now, we'll forever be in this dilemma. We'll forever be in this dilemma. And eventually something will come out and the news will change. Another war will break out. Something bigger. I mean, I know our focus has been on Israel-Palestine for a while, but eventually something will overcome and this will be old news. And the question is, at that moment, does the Arab world go back to its old ways or does it progress into the future? And that's the real key point in history now for where we could see what you were talking about, Jack, with European Union style, being able to travel around from country to country, property rights. I think Arabs and the Middle Eastern people are capable of it, but we need, and I know this is going to sound a little crazy, we need radical individualism and radical micro-tribalism back in the Middle East. This collectivist Arab mentality is going to kill the Middle East. If everybody thinks they're in the Middle East, they think that they're Arab, and they're all loyal to one specific Arab supremacist family somewhere in the Middle East, we are screwed. We need individual tribalism. We need this micro tribalism back. You're part of this tribe. You're part of this tribe. You're part of this tribe. Protect your own, care for your own, and let's build something beautiful together.
Absolutely. And hopefully not just have Armageddon with the third temple and the red heifers you saw, right?
Inshallah.
That's a whole other can of worms, but
yeah,
really
we can do that for conspiracy talk next time.
we might have to do the conspiracy talk, but I know we're going a little bit over time, but we just really appreciate
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for,
that was a good way to close. Yeah, I would say worldwide, that's what we need. I mean, even in Europe, you have tyrannical laws and people's property rights being violated by their own governments. And that's why you had things like Brexit, like people just being fed up of being controlled, being taxed to death, not having rights, not being free to trade, not being free to live and choose their own destinies. So we really just need that worldwide, whether it's, China, like CCP needs to lay off, and the billions of Chinese people, my fellow Chinese people need to learn about property rights, through that firewall that's there. And even in America too, you have a huge divide. You have some people voted for Trump or Kamala, for example, but you had like more than half, I'm pretty sure, not vote at all. And that's been the case for many of the past presidential elections. So you have this huge divide growing around the world. You have Javier Milei, rescuing Argentina from rampant socialism and trying to correct things. So you have what I see and I'm hopeful for is these ideas of radical individualism, of property rights for all and justice for all are really spreading. But definitely there are still people, and it's like coming to a head. It's like half and half, but at least we're not the minority anymore. We're not that minority who's like, hey guys, slavery's wrong. It's like, it's actually like, yeah, like half the world, you could probably go out into your neighborhood and find at least one other person, one of every two people just kind of agreeing with you, and maybe more in certain places, especially in the States, being like, yeah, we're in Florida, who just want to be left alone. And if you ask them, do you like feel extorted when you have to pay taxes, when it's like a quarter of your income taken, for example, or property taxes, they would agree, and so
yeah,
I just learned in the comment section that I'm white.
Wow.
Unironically, I think that person's actually calling me white.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
that's why I have the hat. I own up to it.
Oh yeah, white.
Thank you for white colonizing our channel.
I was gonna get a mug too. I'm like, white colonizing.
Anytime you need a little bit of colonization, call your boy.
We greatly appreciate you, and just keep up the good work. Your voice is needed. We need you out there actually doing real journalism. So many people in this camp over here in America don't go over there, don't go to the people, don't interview them, don't go do the groundwork. So you're doing the right thing. You're doing the real work, and that's why we appreciate you. No matter what, we just want you to keep doing that. So definitely support his work. I think if you see what he's doing with his videos, it's really funny. His channel is worth checking out. Pop it down below, and he covers a wide variety of topics, and he has a great history of different places he's traveled. So check out his merch and his comedy and all that good stuff. So, you really enjoy it. Even if you don't agree with everything, you're definitely going to see things that are going to open your eyes and make you question things. So,
yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. This was really fun. We'll do it again for sure. Very, very fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Tal. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
All right. And yes, thanks again, everybody, for being a part of this. I know for some people, it was really emotionally tough. Some of the comments were really like, oh my gosh, how dare you talk about this? You support Israel. It's just like, this is the collectivist mentality and this nonsense that we've been trying to fight. This idea that you can't discuss philosophy, you can't discuss history, you can't sit there and say, hey, there's problems here that are not just with states, but with religious violence and other histories and sectarian violence. And you need to think about those things. And how do you reach people to get them to, want a peaceful future and to build those inroads to peace through free markets and respect of individual consent? So
basically, y'all need philosophy and critical thinking 101. All right.
Definitely.
But yeah, otherwise, thanks so much, you guys, for being here. I hope you enjoyed the show and learned something new.
Yeah. Take care.